Trevor, you don't know this yet. You will someday. Oh, the market share capture, the brain share capture of toddlers by Sesame Street is like 95%.
It's insane.
It's
Sesame
insane.
Street.
Wait, it's still that high?
Oh, yes.
That's amazing.
God.
It's a classic.
No,
and it
but
works.
I'm happy about it. I thought like it was over for Sesame
No,
Street,
still
and now it was all like Cocomelon and no. Oh, that's really
They
good.
have got to strangle.
Yeah.
They have your kid in a head.
Yeah, it's so Sesame Street,
Well, that's a healthy headlock.
Peppa Pig, and Cocomelon.
Oh, Peppa Pig
Cocomelon
is
is like
fire,
crack. I call them-
Cocomelon, I
Yeah.
outlawed Cocomelon.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
Cocomelon is dangerous.
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
what's
dangerous,
happening there.
dangerous. I call them the Coco fellas, the kids
Yeah.
that watch that
I
stuff.
don't know
Yeah,
what's
it's
happening
weird.
with
If I have
Cocomelon.
if I have to listen to any more Cocomelon, I'm bringing back Stop-and-frisk. That's how much it will radicalize me.
This is What Now with Trevor Noah.
We were telling people, when we talked about you, I was like, do you know black people don't know Malcolm's black, but white people don't know Malcolm's black.
Yeah,
We were talking about, I was like, white people don't know.
no, I'm stealth. I would have, back in the day, it would have been I was born in the wrong century. 19th century, was fantastic for me.
You would have taken the system down from the inside out.
They're like, wait a minute. Like historians would have uncovered 100 years later. Wait a second. He was black. What was he doing in Congress?
Talking about Malcolm being passing
Yeah.
to white
right,
people.
right.
Black people see the hair, they're like, no.
Yeah, right.
They're like,
It's a tell.
It is a tell. It is completely a tell. But now I didn't know that. When did this Nigerian thing happen?
I did my 23andMe, and I'm 23% Igbo,
Oh my God.
which is so fantastic. And I put it on Twitter, and this is like every Nigerian on Twitter was like, "Oh my God, fantastic!" But every single one was positive. Like it was the most, inclusive experience I've ever had in my life. I was very happy, but it was obvious because Jamaicans are all Igbo, right?
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
Jamaica's just Nigeria.
Right.
It's my
Yeah.
it's my advanced theory of
So
Jamaica.
you had no clue that you had any Nigerian in you.
Well, I guessed.
Okay, but now you know definitively.
Now I know
Wait, what is it? So
definitively.
23%
That's a significant
Igbo?
amount.
It's not enough for a tipping point, as we've learned from this book. It's not enough, Malcolm. You're
No,
like 7% short.
We can change the
yeah,
rules.
yeah.
You know, Nigerians,
Hey,
we like to switch the rules.
Nigerians with 1%.
Each
Yeah.
one of us.
So I
because
went-
Nigerians will be technically 1% or is the more than.
On the Jamaican front, I was at the World Championships, track championships, and I see Shelley Ann Fraser Price, right? One of my heroes. So she's like this big. I go up and say, "Hello, my name is Malcolm. I don't know if you know this. I'm half Jamaican." She says, "There's no such thing as half Jamaican."
There's only Jamaican.
There's only Jamaican.
Yeah,
That's the right attitude.
That is the right
That is the right
attitude.
attitude. There's no such thing as 23% Nigerian.
Yeah, I
Yes,
sometimes think it
complete
would. That's what
Nigerian.
like if instead of the British, if like Africans colonized the world, no one would have been left out. Do you know what I mean? Because because all other colonization was like you're not like us,
Yeah.
and then like whereas Africans are very much anyone black anywhere, they just go like no, you're with us, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. It doesn't matter. Have you even seen those videos online
Yeah.
of people who can just speak the language or can do the accent well? They're like, all right, you're one of us.
That's right.
That's, I'm saying Malcolm should go to Abbey State. They'll make him a chief.
Chief
I'll-
Gladwell.
I'll take
Chief
it.
Gladwell.
Igwe Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh man,
love that.
Malcolm, I saw you were releasing a new book, and you know I'm a huge fan of yours. We've talked over the years. I'm always trying to see what Malcolm Gladwell is thinking of, to give me a sense of like what I'm missing in the world. I think a lot of people think like that. As my friend David says, who you've met, David always used to say, you make people think they're smart because they read your book and then they talk to other people about it. But like this book is an interesting take on Malcolm Gladwell, like Revenge of the Tipping Point. At first I was like, wait, is it a continuation? Is it a... But no, it feels like you are going up against you.
You thinking it's an exercise in self-hatred? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
no. Because here's the thing. Oftentimes people will write a book that, and very, very seldom will it change the world. Let's start with that, right? The Tipping Point, I would argue, changed the way people fundamentally think about many things. And then very few people would then go back and go, well, actually, let's change some of the thinking that this book basically laid the foundations for. Why do that?
Well, no one likes changing his mind more than me, first of all. I just enjoy it. My dad really enjoyed it. And as a kid, some of my greatest memories of my father who was a marvelous character in his own, was him just shamelessly changing his mind on a subject, like without any explanation or apology. He just would agree. He'd talk to somebody, and if he would always make this calculation, he would talk to someone, and if he thought they knew even 1% more on a subject than he did, he'd just like, all right, you're right. I now think this. And he was done. I thought it was fantastic as a child. And secretly that's what I wanted. I want to be the guy who wakes up and decides. And Kate, my partner, is always making fun of me on this because I will not like someone and then I'll just wake up and think, they're great. Like, why don't we have them over? She's like, wait, I thought you didn't like them. It's like, yeah, that's, that was the past. Now I'm all over them. So I didn't read The Tipping Point after I wrote it. And then it was its anniversary, and I thought, I should read it again because we were thinking of doing a revised edition.
Yeah.
So I read it again. I'm like, wait a second. I wrote that? Like, I just felt I was like arguing with the book the whole time. So that's I want to do a new one. That was basically what happened.
Are you the opposite or the same?
I'm the opposite. And that's why I find it so interesting that you were raised by a man who like changes his mind easily. Like my parents are like deep Christians and they're not changing their mind about anything.
No, my parents, deep Christians.
Okay, that's interesting.
Wow.
They're not changing.
All of us here.
Okay.
Super deep Christians. Here we are. Three of us are gathered in his name. Let's go.
No, but no, not change their mind about that.
Yeah. So I'm saying that I'm used to real rigidity and rules, and I won't call it dogma, orthodoxy, right? So it's surprising that I think it takes great humility, but it also must be quite painful to go back and read this book that, as Trevor said, changed the way we think about ideas and how they spread and be like, not right.
I don't think it's painful. First of all, just to go back on parents for a second. So my father's, can I talk about my dad?
Yeah, of course. Talk about your dad.
He passed 6 or 7 years ago. And I wrote his obituary and I said he had strong opinions about the Bible, gardening, and mathematics. And on everything else, he was open to suggestion. And I sort of think that's the right model. You got to have your core set of things that you hold dearly. And I think you should, I always use the phrase that ideas should be held loosely.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not values, but ideas. Values you hold tightly, but ideas you hold loosely because stuff changes. And you grow up or you're, in the original Tipping Point, there's a chapter on crime, which is just why New York City crime fell in the 90s. It's an appalling chapter. I mean, it's just appalling.
Is this like the broken windows?
Yes. Like, Jesus. Okay. Like, what was I thinking? I mean, I didn't know any better, I guess. But it's not difficult. To me, it's very freeing to say I was wrong.
I'm curious, is it that do you think the world has changed that radically in the 25 years? Or were the ideas wrong then?
Well, the world, yes, of course the world has changed, although probably changed less than we think. I think sometimes we fetishize, certain kinds of technological innovation and think we've reinvented ourselves as human beings. And it's just, to my mind, a little bit more of the same. But mostly it's that I've moved, like the crime example is a good one, that I wrote that broken windows was a fetish in New York City in the 90s. The mayor, Giuliani at the time, was like running around and saying, the only way to stop murder was to stop people from peeing on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. Now, I think he was right to say that people shouldn't be peeing on the sidewalk and we should clean up. That was totally right. But he made two subsequent connections. His first thing was that the way to stop people from engaging in that kind of behavior was to arrest them by the thousands. And then secondly, he said, and that's also, by the way, how you stop violent crime. Mm. Both of those second claims were, in retrospect, preposterous, right? In the moment in the late 90s, when we had just witnessed New York go from being one of the least safe big cities in North America to one of the safest, we were sort of willing to pay any price for that improvement in safety and accept any explanation. And that was the fever that I was caught up in. I was like, okay, we're arresting hundreds of thousands of young Black men in the Bronx and Brooklyn, but better that than being killed. That's what we were all thinking, right? And then, I subsequently learned this. It's actually an incredibly interesting history. What happens is a judge stops stop-and-frisk in New York. We go from stopping 700,000 people in 1 year to stopping 20,000. Oh. And everyone says, including the judge who stopped it, crime's going to go back up. And what happens? Crime falls another 50%. And everyone's like, oh my God, not only was stop and frisk irrelevant to the crime drop, maybe it was preventing us from using police resources in a way that actually helped solve. So we learned, this happened in 2012. And my point is, if you lived through that learning moment in 2012, when we took away stop and frisk and crime fell another 50%, if you lived through those next 5 years and you didn't change your mind, then you are morally bankrupt, right? You have to have changed your mind at that point. So you have to acknowledge it's not wrong to be wrong in 1996. It's wrong to not change your mind after we learned something crucial in those post stop and frisk years. It's like you have to respond. The price of playing the game of ideas in the world is you have to stay on your toes and respond to new evidence as it arises. You want to play this game, that's the rule.
Okay, here's the thing. I think there are two things that you don't do that probably help you. One, you don't make it your identity. So you wrote about broken windows, but then there were some people who shaped their lives around broken windows. And then secondly, you didn't implement any policies. And I think that's probably one of the scariest things. Like politicians in America are perfect examples. Very few of them are able to say, yeah, that was wrong. We used data that at the time was misread or misunderstood, or we used what we had and we made an incorrect decision. They don't say that. They go like, no, if you look at what we were trying to do and we still, because everyone's afraid to say, I mean, just in life, everyone is afraid to say, I was wrong. Like listening to you right now, I don't know how many times I've heard human beings say that. Just go like, I look back and go like, damn, what was I thinking?
Oh, so, I mean, I find it so weird. And also it was so long ago, like this was the late 90s. I'm older than you guys, but it's like, have you looked at your high school yearbook or like, it's just everything about it is cringeworthy. I mean, it should be fine to look back on your 25 years in the past self and have an issue. I would hope you would have an issue.
I think it's because so much of the world that we live in currently is built, say, as a foreigner coming to America. So many times the Constitution is referenced and the amendments are referenced. Our world is built on ideas that sometimes emerged thousands of years ago, and we refuse to revisit them in the same way you're revisiting Tipping Point.
But the funny thing about the amendments for me is the name itself. Like whenever people get angry, you know, like you talk about the amendments, you go like, oh, you change the amendment. Then like, you don't change the amendment. And I'm like, amendment means change. It literally means change.
But they don't want any more change.
Yes, but what I'm saying is like, that's what I find ironic in the whole situation is like, I agree with you. Constitution, old document, but it's a living document. You know, it was one of the first documents that was created where they said, hey, the whole purpose of this thing is that you're supposed to change it because, look, we think what we think right now. It's almost like the forefathers looked at each other and they were just like, I don't know about these wigs. I don't know about these shoes. So I don't know about these ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's let people change them. And like, I've seen, I mean, I don't know if you like read reviews about your work. Some people almost seem angry at you. They like seem angry that Malcolm Gladwell would change, because here's my theory. So I love changing my mind. Okay, maybe that's why I like you so much. But I think some people base their ideas on other people's ideas. And so then if you change your idea, they get so angry at you because they're like, no, you, because
you're like, making them do work.
Yeah.
So you have to revise your opinion of them. And that seems like, that seems like an imposition. I think that's what, as opposed to kind of, it's the same way when a musician makes a kind of change in their style. And there's always a set of fans who are appalled by this. Like they want the musician to be kind of frozen in amber. Yeah. To be the same person they encountered for the first time at 16. And how dare you use an electric guitar or whatever the argument is. Yeah, it is a funny, I think the question is, who is your obligation to as a writer? Is it to your audience or is it to yourself? And I think it has to be, first and foremost, it has to be to yourself.
We're going to continue this conversation right after this short break. So now let's play. I want to play a Malcolm Gladwell game in this moment here. Okay. So someone might go, oh, but Malcolm, how can I trust this? Because now like you just wrote a book that says I shouldn't trust what you wrote in the other book, and then do you know what I mean?
It's not that you shouldn't trust what I said in the other book.
Right.
It's that I've moved on. It's just not where I am at this moment.
So you're saying like it's not that the ideas are wrong, it's that we should be able to we should be able to evolve our ideas based on new information.
I haven't repudiated them. They're not who I am now, right?
Yeah.
It's, in the same way, it wasn't, to go back to my dad, for example, when my dad changed his mind, sometimes it would be, he would go from, A to Z. But sometimes it was just, there was an earlier version of himself that believed this, and then that self was gone. And he was now someone who believed this new thing. It was just a kind of, it's just about accepting the evolution. The thinking involves evolution.
You're somebody, you're a journalist, and you used to digging and burrowing and, finding old tapes and newspaper articles. And like, for the average person, like, where do they get the new ideas? Where do they even get the opportunity to change their minds,
This is interesting. I have a friend of mine. I was playing the game of, I love playing the Magic Wand game, where if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would it be in the world? And her answer was to make everyone in the world for 1 year trade places with someone else in the world. So just imagine a big random, everyone in the world puts their name in a hat.
Swap.
And then you put your address. You put your address in a hat, and then you pull out a different address, and you got to live there for a year. And her argument would be...
This only works for people with addresses, by the way.
Right.
I'm just going to point this out.
If you're unhoused.
Yeah, some people are just on the street. You just have to put where you were on the street, and then someone switches with you.
And her argument would be that this would be the single greatest way to solve, the single greatest short-term solution to mankind's problems. By the way, I think she's 100% right. This is such a genius idea. But my point is, if you want to participate in the world in a kind of ethical way, you have to do a version of this in your life. Mm-hmm. So I have a simple thing I do, which is I try and change the people I follow a very small number of people on Twitter, and I constantly change them. And so I cycle through, I'm always, once a week or something, I drop 2 or 3 people and add 2 or 3 people, just trying, because you get exposed to new.
Yeah.
And I try to get I also want, so I follow the Ukrainian war, I don't know why, really closely, but entirely through these ex-military guys who are obsessed with logistics. I love these guys. And it's stuff I would never in a million years have heard of before. It's not, none of what they say is in the news. It's all so weird and super interesting. My favorite guy is this guy, Trent Telenko. I love Trent Telenko. I want to meet him one day. Who's by the way, he's been saying that Russians are going to lose. He's been saying this since the beginning of the war. And he had this great tweet early in the war where he found a photograph of a Russian transport carrier, like a truck, that was stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
And he zeroes in on the tires.
Oh, I remember this.
Do you remember this?
Yes, I remember this.
Made in the USSR. And he was like, they've lost. Yeah. They can't win. Their tires are from before the wall fell.
Yeah.
And he goes in this whole rant about tires, about how you gotta be rotating the tires. If the truck's in storage, the tire's gonna break apart. It's and if there's tires of that says that this doesn't work and you don't have this, and I was like, so that's you have to keep exposing yourself. That's how you learn about what you need to update.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now when I read something conventional about the war, I have a slightly different perspective because I have Trent in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm asking a different set of questions about than I would have otherwise. It's not that I'm a skeptic. It's just that I have a different, I'm looking at it from a different perspective.
What you've described, I think you have this basic level of intellectual curiosity. Mm-hmm. And Trevor said earlier that the reason you can hold your ideas loosely is because your ideas aren't your identity.
Yeah.
Now, I would say it feels in this specific moment for a lot of people that their ideas are actually a huge part of their identity. They make up their identity. So if they're not going to come apart from that idea because it's who am I? There's a vacuum after that. Mm. So what do we do when we're engaging with people in our lives who ideas have become their identity, and you're trying to get them to see another point of view or point them towards something else, and they're like, oh, you're just a crazy liberal, or you're just a crazy conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought about this recently because I go to this little coffee shop near my hometown upstate, and there's always these two old guys who are in the corner. They're there every time I go there. And they're always having an argument about, not an argument, a long discussion about movies. They're movie junkies.
Mm-hmm.
And they have encyclopedic knowledge, and I eavesdrop on them all the time. And I realize that there's something really lovely there, which is that they have clearly a huge part of their identity is about the enjoyment and appreciation of that particular art form. And I would imagine that if one of those guys was a Trumper MAGA type and the other was a diehard liberal, it wouldn't matter because they had found this area that was more important to their identity and that where they could find common ground and where they could find each other, find joy in each other's company. And it's those kinds of spaces that I feel have been eroded. I use the movie example for a reason, which was for the longest time in many cultures around the world, the movies occupied this huge position in the way people related to the world.
Yeah.
They saw, talk to people who grew up in New York in the 30s and 40s, they would see a movie every day. And that's what they would talk about on the playground.
Yeah.
And that's what they would, sports function in that way. And I sometimes think that what we need actually weirdly is more sports, not less sports, because sports are one of the few things that can occupy a big space and bring people together. And you can have a long conversation with someone about sports and politics would never come up. Even my parents would be a good example. My, white father, black mother, a lot of people looked at them and said, you guys are so different. That's not how they organized their life. They said they thought they were exactly the same. They thought we're two committed Christians who, their fathers read the same books. I think that's the issue. It's just not good to spend all your time wallowing in political arguments.
But I also think it's this. I think I remember a friend of mine describing to me, he worked as a computer programmer. And I remember one day he was explaining the concept of the second system effect. The second system effect is what they teach programmers and coders about when working on a program and then moving it to the next version. And they go, you always have to consider the things that might happen that you don't know might happen because you've now changed the program over. Because you always think of what you're updating, you always think of what you're improving, but you seldom think of what that could cause as a knock-on effect to what you didn't want, an unintended consequence. And oftentimes that's what happens, right? You'll see it on your phone all the time. They'll go new software, and then very quickly afterwards they'll be like new software on top of the new software because we just realized that what the new software did was it made the keyboard unusable when you were sending a text to certain people in a group chat. That's a second system effect, right? And that gave me a whole new way to think about life because now I would go, oh, sometimes we make a change that is oftentimes an improvement, by the way, but we don't think of what the possible second system effect could be. Like streaming and the proliferation of TV shows and like on demand. You can watch Breaking Bad when you want to watch Breaking Bad. And have you watched Game of Thrones? I'll watch it when you know what I mean? It's given you so much choice. But what a lot of people don't realize is it's robbed us of communal consumption. But then what have we all seen? The debate. Oh, I saw the debate. Oh, I saw the debate. Did you see the debate?
Yeah.
And so unfortunately now, I don't think it's politics so much as it's live. Live is the only thing that still exists in society that forces us to all to experience it at the same time. And so it's not sports and it's not politics. It's just these are the final vestiges of live television. The debates are live.
So
the election is live.
Olympics.
The Trump assassination is live. The Olympics are live. The Super Bowl is live. But I think what it's done is it's robbed us of shared realities is what I think. I used to watch the same TV shows as my parents, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And inversely, they had to watch the same shows I watched. So sometimes my mom would be watching the cartoons or the sitcoms that I was watching before we got to the news or like a murder movie documentary or whatever thing. But we had ATV and it played in linear time. So we just had to do it together. And I actually think that's one of the things that we're experiencing in society is like less live.
I realize now when I'm outside of live, like many people, I'm lost.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Perfect Couple.
Yeah.
Why did I watch Perfect Couple on Netflix? That's like,
or
I'm never getting, I got like got 5 episodes in. I'm like, I cannot believe that I have just devoted this.
Now it's time for F1 Love, a segment where I get to talk all things F1 and why you should be excited for the F1 Las Vegas GP. So if you know anything about me, you know I love a few things in my life. I love video games. I love tech. I love traveling. I love copious amounts of ice cream. And there are few things I love more than Formula One. I've been watching Formula One my entire life. I started watching it with my dad. I think I've told you this, but it is one of the most exciting, crazy, anything can happen sports in the world. And as I've grown to appreciate it more because, you know, F1 athletes apparently are the fittest athletes in the world. They've got some of the strongest necks, which I know is a weird thing to think is cool, but I do. Because apparently their necks can sustain like 3, 4, or 5G, which is pretty insane if you know what a neck can usually handle. But anyway, I'm really excited because Formula One used to only be in Europe, and now one of the most exciting races of the season is in Las Vegas. Formula One has 2 kinds of races. You've got the races that are on tracks, and so those ones are really fun and fantastic. But then every now and again, you'll have a race that's on the streets of the city that it's in. And the F1 race in Las Vegas is one of those. The cars are out on the strip, racing around. I'm talking of hundreds and hundreds of miles per hour. The stuff you wish you could do, they do it for real. And Vegas is the best place for it. You get to go out, you get to see the drivers over the weekend, you get to hear the cars. And if you've never heard an F1 car, like you haven't lived. It literally sounds like the end and the beginning of the world at the same time. If you get a chance, try and go through the pit lanes if you have that opportunity. It's amazing. You get to see the cars up close, you get to see the technology, you get to see like even the tires. The tires are so impressive. But if you don't get the backstage experience, just go to the race. Wear a hat, cheer for a team. See people drive cars the way they're supposed to be driven, and then think to yourself, I could do that at home, but do not do it at home. That was F1 Love, brought to you by Las Vegas, hosting the upcoming F1 race, November 21 to 23. Tickets are available now by visiting f1lasvegasgp.com/tickets. There's got to be one chapter in this book that you enjoyed writing the most. Like
easy.
Yeah, you have like a guilty joy when it comes to certain topics. This is something I know about you. You have like you'll have like a giggle in you. You have like a mischievous feeling in you where you're like, ooh, I love that I'm getting into this. Like so what's like the most Gladwell chapter in this book?
It's the Harvard chapter.
The Harvard chapter? The admissions?
Yeah.
Let's talk through that.
It's all about this strange fact that there is no university in the United States that has more Division I varsity sports than Harvard. So everyone thinks that the sports-obsessed schools are like in the South. No. The most sports-obsessed school is Harvard. Not only that, they're so obsessed with that if you're an athlete, they have the front doors for smart kids who compete and it's really hard to get in the front door. They have a back door for athletes and rich people, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And the back door is way easier to get in. The simplest way to get into Harvard is to be a good athlete, not to be a good student. So the question is, why would they care so much about sports that they would like create a special back door for them and also play so many? And I think the answer is in the kind of sports they're playing. So what sports are, if they have all these rowing,
got it,
middleweight or heavyweight and lightweight rowing, and each team is like, what is it, 25? I've forgotten, some incredible number. Fencing.
Okay.
Fencing.
Sailing.
Oh,
how do we feel about sailing?
Sailing.
Tennis.
Interesting.
Tennis. Now, rugby. So you guys are Africans, particularly you guys are serious rugby playing people.
Yeah.
Understand that in the American context.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rugby's a very different animal. They're not playing rugby in the south side of Chicago.
Right.
Field hockey, squash. You can see where I'm going.
Yeah.
So they reserve. Now, you add up all those numbers, men and women, right? Coaches, kids sitting on the bench. You add all those numbers up and you see that they have reserved an entire huge pool of admission slots for white people with enough money to be good at white people sports.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing is like so hilariously obvious. And like they're pretending, for years they've been pretending, oh no, we believe the athlete brings something special to the camp. No bullshit. Like I do this thing with tennis. In order to play Division I tennis in this country, you must have played junior tennis.
Okay.
In order to play junior tennis, your parents have to, I did the math, have to spend at a minimum $50,000 a year on your game, and probably north of $100,000 when you add up all the things. So basically what Harvard is saying is we've got whatever it is, 12 spots on our tennis team, which we are reserving for people who have parents capable of spending $100,000 a year on their games. Like, it's like, I mean, if you don't do this, if you have an elite school that just takes the smartest kids, what that means is your culture is going to turn over with each new wave of smart immigrants that come.
Yeah.
So you're going to be all Jewish in the 50s, then you're going to be all Korean now,
damn.
and you're going to be all Nigerian in like 10 years.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I think it's an amazing thing.
Why would you?
But you can't. But you can see how if your conception of what your school is a place where you have lots of preppy kids in blazers, you can't play that game.
Yeah.
Because you're going to wake up one day and you're going to have a lot of Igbo shouting at loud voices, running around your campus, and that's unthinkable. If
it's funny that you say that, because I've noticed that in traveling the world, there are some cities in the world that have made it so that the area, like certain areas, are sort of dictated by who can just afford to buy there, right? Mm-hmm. So like there'll be parts of London, for instance, where I went like 20 years ago, and then it was like a certain group of people, and then all of a sudden and then it would like be Russian, and then it would be this, and then it would be that, and I was just like, oh wow, this whole area switched up, because the money is something that can shift to people and to cultures.
Yeah.
But now rowing and sailing and that doesn't change.
That does not change.
Do you know what I mean? Let me ask you a question, Malcolm. Like in the book, there are many moments where you talk about like it's not necessarily the tipping point, but it's like some of the larger things that made something happen. Like for instance, you talk about Will and Grace, you know, and you go, this is like the show that changes people's perspectives on gay people in America, etc. You know, and then some people would go like, but what about Ellen? Ellen was on before that. And in the opioid section, you know, when you're talking about the Sackler family, you're like, this is, you know, the story they told, and the passive voice when they're defending themselves, and you tell the story where some people might read it and go like, oh, but I actually think the issue is the doctors. Like, how do you choose to hone in, or where do you think you've actually found the real lever that has moved society or shifted in a certain direction versus others?
So the Will and Grace, let's do the Will and Grace one. That was really interesting. So there's a really brilliant woman whose work I read and love by the name of Bonnie Dow, who does this kind of meta-analysis of television shows and their importance. And she looked at the way, including in Ellen, the way that television had described and discussed gay relationships. And she said that up until Will and Grace, every time gay people were talked about, even if they were talked about on television in a positive way, a series of rules were in place. The emphasis on the show was always about how straight people reacted to the gay person, not on the gay person themselves. The second thing was that the gay person's gayness was always a problem that had to be solved. And the third thing was that the gay person was always in isolation. So she looks at Ellen and she says, Ellen, yes, had a gay character, first openly gay character on network television. But those three rules were still in effect. When Ellen comes out in that pivotal sitcom show from whenever it was, all the rules are in effect. Her gayness is a problem her friends have to solve. The whole show is about her straight friends dealing with the fact that Ellen is like complicated their lives. And she has no gay community on those shows. It's just her. Will and Grace comes along and breaks all three rules for the first time on television. Will's got a community. He's got Jack, right? And that whole his gayness is not a problem to be solved. It's never even a problem. It's just a fact, right? And the show is not about straight people reacting to Will. It's about Will and Grace together reacting normally to, and that makes that show revolutionary. That argument to me is so, and if all you do is watch Will and Grace without the benefit of that kind of analysis, you miss it.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible book that was written about the way Hollywood treated homosexuality, pointing out that look at all the movies in which gay people appear from the 60s through the end of the 90s. And this guy just counts up what happens to the character, the gay character. And like in 60% of the cases, the gay character dies. In 10%, they commit suicide. In 10%, they die of a drug overdose. Like Hollywood just killed them off.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's what they did. And you were allowed to feel sympathy but they were always up. It was always this dreadful burden, right? And Will and Grace, it's not a burden. It's just like it just
happens to be part of their lives.
It's just part of their life, and that is so. Like I feel like it is no coincidence. That's right around the time when the country wakes up one day, after flipping out about gay marriage, wakes up one day and just doesn't even say "I love gay marriage." Just shrugs and says. Are we really going to fight about this? And it just goes away.
So it's actually funny, when I was reading through that chapter, and when I was reading through some of the chapters about like over stories that you talk about, the story that is over every other story that we're telling ourselves. I don't know if you've watched it. There's an animated movie. I think it's Mitchells versus the Machines. I think it's called, and it's a story of this family that goes up against like machines taking over the world. And one day I was having a conversation with a group of friends. And someone said to me like, "Oh, I hated that movie." And I was like, "Really? It was a great movie." They're like, "Yeah, it was great, but I didn't like that at the end we learned that the main protagonist was a gay character." And I was like, "Why not?" And they were like, "Why didn't we know from the beginning? I feel like you just tried to sneak it in." And I was like, "Are you pro?" And she's like, "No, I'm pro gay rights. And that's why I feel like it should have been." And then I said, I think that's been the problem with a lot of programming actually, is that because Hollywood as a whole, and obviously I'm using a big umbrella here, but because Hollywood as a whole, people forget is a business, they make these like fake stories and fake moves that are artificially trying to jump on trends that are not trends. Do you get what I'm saying? So they'll be like, "Oh, wow, gay people are becoming very popular in society. We need to make a gay show." And you're like, "What is a gay show?" And they're like, "A show where a person uses their gayness to make sure that the community center doesn't get shut down." And it's like, guys, that's not a show.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. Gay people are not using their gayness to do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I actually think that becomes part of the problem is like now we are not witnessing people as human beings. The story is about you are black. And so now because of your blackness, you must make the blackity black. I was like, no, man, just make a story. And to your point, Will and Grace, it's like, Will and Jack they were gay, but the story wasn't like what gay thing gays them today. It was like, no, it's just a story. And you got to know them as human beings.
And the show is interesting because it puts a finger on the issue fundamentally was not that by the early 21st century, most Americans thought that there was something pathological about being gay, or they had some revulsion at. No, it was quite specific. It was, they did not believe that gay people were capable of the same kind of relationships as straight people. It was that specific. It was about relationships. And that's why marriage was being denied. And that show is just about a successful relationship involving in the previous sort of, to get your point, Trevor, the preachiness assumed the problem was specific to something about the gay person and the way they practiced their life. No. It was a separate thing about could they participate in something that straight people have been participating in for thousands and thousands of years. And just getting people to say, oh yeah, they can participate. That's all we needed.
Yeah.
You didn't need to win the bigger battle.
Right. I've seen a few times how, so like for me, this is purely anecdotal, but in New York, I play football. I play soccer with a bunch of guys from all over the world, literally all over the world, all different walks of life. Like we have all of Africa on the team, and then we have Europe, and then we have Eastern Europe, and then we have like sometimes we'll have like Australia and Asia, and then America, obviously. But it'll be a collection, 22 guys from everywhere coming together. And one of the fascinating things I've noticed is we have built our relationships and our friendships and our perceptions of each other and each other's peoples without ever speaking about them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When we come to the game, we play the game. I judge the other people by how they play the game, and they judge me by how I play the game. Badly, well on a day, terribly. But that's how we know each other. So you're like, Latif, why don't you do this? You always do this. Joe, why are you doing this? Ah, no, zero technique. You have zero technique. Why are you doing this? And it's like, shut up, Joe. And then like, what I realized the one day was almost magical is like everyone on that team has a human example of somebody from another country. So if you say to them, what are you Ugandans? They go like, oh man, I know this guy Joe, he's from Uganda. And it's like, oh, what are Ugandans? Then he's just like, you know him as a human being. Does that make sense? And I think sometimes like in these stories, we forget that we don't get to know people as human beings because we don't see them doing human being things. And then we give ourselves like when I say ourselves, I mean like, let's say the dominant group, you get to exist in your fullness.
Yeah.
And then everyone who's on the margins has to exist only in one area. It's like, all right, gay people, you get a day of pride, and then the rest of it is for straight people. And even then we're going to be like, why do you get a day? And you're like, well, every day is a straight pride day. Every day is like chinos and terrible shirts. It's like...
It's also, the soccer thing is great because the key to getting people to making that magic happen is to have give everyone a job to do. You're all busy. Yeah. That's why it works.
Yeah.
Right? That's the kind of, I always put this, the busyness thing, if you're all focused on the game, you're exhausted, you're running up and down, who has time for all the nonsense?
Don't go anywhere, because we got more What Now after this.
Malcolm, I'm curious. You say you went back, read Tipping Point, and you're like, this is appalling, right? I'm interested about why it wasn't just an amendment, because most people would do like, there's a revised edition and you write a chapter and you say like, it's a summary. Why is it revisiting and it's a whole book?
Because I'm crazy.
Okay.
Because I don't have enough to do. Because having two kids apparently is just really easy, and I can do. I got time.
I'm loving watching the difference in a man's perspective on having kids and a woman's. Malcolm's like, yeah, it feels like you have more time, and Christiana's like, there's no time left.
My life is over. Malcolm's like, I wrote another book.
No, I've worked it out that I have 45 minutes to myself a day.
Okay.
Between 10 and 10:45. That's my time.
Okay. And you write your book.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
And you write your book.
No. No, I don't know. I also thought it would be fun. I actually I've been enjoying myself tremendously over the last, I've had a kind of, ever since I started the podcasting stuff, it's loosened me up about, I'm a lot less precious about the stuff I do, and I'm doing different kinds of stories, and my position now is why not?
Yeah.
And why not do something? It sounds like it'll be interesting. Who knows what'll happen? The turning point for me was when I started the podcast and I started doing weird shows on cranky kind of, going after golfers or whatever. And I was like, that was really fun. Like, I didn't realize that kind of thing. And then I did that audiobook with Paul Simon, with my friend Bruce, which, I don't really know that much about music. I know I liked Paul Simon. And we just sat down with him, and it was just we did hours and hours of interviews with him, and it literally changed my life. I just realized, wow, I thought I was in this for the writing. I'm not. I'm in this because I like talking to people. I like interviewing them. That's what I like.
Yeah.
Right.
And that, when I realized that, it's like, oh, this clarifies everything. I shouldn't be obsessing about how I'm going to make a story out of this. I should be obsessing about the interview, the conversation. And so I did it again this summer with this incredible woman. And I met with her like 8 times. And she's someone who deals with trauma. I'm going to get emotional. She was involved with a guy on death row and she fails to keep him alive, to save him, and he gets killed by the state.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what was going through her head when he died. That's what I wanted to know. And I decided I was going to take the long path. We took 16 hours, whatever it was, to get there.
Wow. And
then we kind of got there, and I was completely overwhelmed. I couldn't stop crying. It was so, and then I went back and I interviewed it was so unprofessional. I interviewed the guy's lawyer, and I had him tell the same story. And I couldn't stop crying. I had to end the interview. I was like, I'm sorry, sir, I can't It's just, but it was because I just made that investment, and I had just sat and listened, right? I realized at the grand old age of 61, I realized that's what I want to do. Like and there's a lot of that in this book. There's a lot of this just sitting and listening to people, like, and kind of trying to make sense of them.
What I'm hearing you say is something that I feel like we could all work on a little bit more, and that is being a little less serious about how we see ourselves in the world, because I think of the different paths, the different universes that Malcolm Gladwell could have been in. You could have been someone that got more serious and more prescriptive, and you could have written a book about, and now let me tell you, it's 20,000 hours, and here's what else you got to do. It's not just the windows, it's the doors and the floors and the sidewalks and you could have, no, you really. And I think there are people who do that because it becomes, again, going back to, it becomes their identity. So they're like, I've achieved success in this, I must hold on to it, and I need to do more of it. And then the second part of it is we forget to have like fun. We forget the fun side of life. We forget the enjoyment. We forget people are very like serious about things. I even noticed I was falling into it. Like if you asked me a question, I would give you like the serious answer first, but I'm not that person actually, and I've noticed it starting in America, to be honest. And like South Africa is very far behind, thank God. But like when I'm in South Africa, I realize I'm taking this far too seriously. I'm taking all of it too seriously. Do you know what I'm saying?
Can I tell you my South Africa story on this very fun?
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, I forget the president of South Africa. His name is
Ramaphosa.
Ramaphosa.
Yeah. Cyril Ramaphosa.
So I'm at this conference in South Africa. Actually, that's when I texted you because I was walking around Cape Town and I was like, white people know their real estate. And then and Trevor's like, yes, they do. So I go to this conference and Ramaphosa is speaking. He gets up in front of the stage. He's like, and the lights go out, right? Because the power is always going off in Cape Town. And then there's silence. And then you hear Ramaphosa saying, it's all my fault. And the whole room just starts laughing. And it's like, how many leaders of major countries in the world would make a self-deprecating joke at that moment? Because it's been a huge political issue for him.
It's been a huge issue.
And so what does he do? He makes, and it's like, it was hilarious. It's just hilarious. I was like, this is off topic, but I was chatting with all these people at this conference. And I'm talking about, I was like, haven't a lot of people been leaving South Africa? Aren't you worried? This guy says, no, it's the best thing. He's like, the only people left in South Africa now are the people who want to be here.
Yeah.
I thought that was fantastic. It like totally changed my perception of, it's like, that's right. They're the ones who are tough enough and are interested and committed. And like, and his point was like, let them go. We're here. It's beautiful.
Malcolm, if you want to revisit another book, I'll put Blink aside because Blink is one of my favorites. Outliers, this 10,000 hours rule. As a parent, I know a lot of people who've been parents for more than 10,000 hours.
Doesn't get any better.
They are terrible.
Terrible.
And they raise rotten kids. Look at the world we live in. So many broken people who need therapy. I think we need to go back and look at the 10,000 hour rule.
No, you're absolutely right. Do you do this? I've started to do this now, and it's so terrible. I now, with no standing whatsoever, other than 3 years as a parent, I'm just openly critiquing people's parenting.
I'm very judgmental. Judging is fun. It's so fun.
I have to stop myself. Like, what are you doing? Like, you see later. You got to stop it. I'm a Virgo. It makes it worse.
Oh yeah.
Have you found that your children have changed how you even look at data or storytelling or stories?
There's zero connection between any intellectual idea I've ever held and my parenting. This is another thing that's totally surprising.
No. I'm not saying your parenting. I mean more them being in your life. And then, like, for instance, I'm watching your face while you speak about them. Every mention of them, even the idea of them, your face lights up in a different way. Yeah. You laugh, you giggle, there's a different side of you that comes out. So I'm asking, how have they affected the way you see data or stories or the world or even your impact on it?
How you approach your work.
Yeah.
Because they always ask women this question. Yeah. So I like that Trevor's asking a man this question.
Well, I always joke that they're free content. I find them just endlessly hilarious, and it makes it very difficult for me to take other things as serious.
Oh, there you go.
So it is part of like, they just become the center of your universe, and like everything else sort of fades away in importance. Any disappointment I have is irrelevant to them. It's just so liberating. Like, they just, my 3-year-old this morning just wanted to like draw. She's making a picture she has a crush on the girlfriend of the nanny. It's the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. And she was making a picture for them.
Aww.
And that's what she's, and like everything else kind of, but it has, but I do understand, you do understand how powerless you are. It's just like, it's hilarious.
It's this surrender.
You just surrender.
But our kids are so different. My 4-year-old threw the most explosive tantrum in the Grove the other day, and the old man sitting next to us switched off his hearing aid.
Wow.
Wow.
He switched it off, and I was like, that's judging my parenting.
That's epic.
But he's great. But he has these moments of like, he becomes really
He's got
serene.
high spirits, and you should have
energetic.
High spirits. That's a good sign.
Yeah. But then it was also, I have to surrender. That's all, that gentle parenting bullshit. Just ride the wave, and it will end.
Yeah,
you know what? In a few years, maybe in a decade, we'll get to relook at our parenting today, and we'll be like, maybe we could have been a little harsher. Maybe we could have.
Yeah, but
I have a theory.
Trevor wants to bring back beating kids.
No. Let me be on the record. Before we wrap this up, let me be on the record and say, I do not believe that I don't believe that parents should ever hit their kids. Ever, 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 ever. However, I do think other people should be allowed to hit your kids. Because then we've created, it's a community thing. And it's like parents can signal to other people that they need their kid disciplined. Then there's no conflict in your child's mind between love and discipline. Let's think, we don't have to solve it now. You go do the research. You think about it as a parent.
No,
I'm going to go formulate the idea and then we'll come back.
I'm totally down with
Let's go back to the village.
I wish someone else from the table would come over
I'm
and say,
saying.
no,
we could be helping each other.
100%. If I see you across the room at some restaurant.
Anytime. Signal me from afar. I will come over and I will do that for you. Malcolm, I know you've got to go now. I want to say thank you, man. Thank you for spending the time with us.
This is really fun.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Great.
That was lovely, guys.
I want to see pictures now.
Oh, I'll show you a picture. I'll get my phone.